Welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating look, I think, into something deeply personal. We're exploring career, self-awareness, and maybe most importantly, the power of collaboration, something that's often, well, misunderstood. We've got some really interesting source material today, mainly excerpts from a piece called Thriving with ADHD, a career in collaboration.
Mhm.
So our goal here is to really unpack this individual story, dig into it and pull out those nuggets of wisdom about how personal challenges, something like ADHD, can actually shape a career. And not just shape it, but maybe lead to a different kind of success, especially when working with others. It's really all about finding what clicks for you personally.
Exactly. And what's so compelling is how this one person's journey offers such practical, universal insights, really, for anyone navigating their job, their career path. It doesn't really matter if you have a formal diagnosis or not, I think. The story powerfully challenges those common ideas about, what one person should be capable of doing alone. And it really shines a spotlight on the absolutely critical role of support systems. So yeah, we'll be sort of connecting the dots today, looking at how embracing your own unique wiring, maybe not fighting against it, can lead to some pretty unexpected and frankly impressive achievements.
Okay, let's jump right in. This core idea, it hits you right at the start of the material. It's a powerful admission, and there's this surprising link to a very famous figure.
Yeah, it's quite striking. The author mentions discovering Richard Branson, Mr. Virgin Group himself, and how Branson openly talked about his own dyslexia and ADHD in his autobiography, Losing My Virginity.
Hmm.
And you can tell this discovery really resonated deeply. It wasn't just name-dropping. Finding someone like Branson who's achieved so much, acknowledging these same challenges, it must have been incredibly validating.
Absolutely, like a permission slip, almost, to see things differently.
Precisely. It provides this touchstone, this external reference point that says, hey, this isn't just a deficit, it's a different way of operating, and look what's possible. It sort of reframes the whole narrative away from purely being a limitation.
And flowing directly from that, this profound personal realization emerges for the author, the statement, I can't do anything by myself.
Hmm.
Now, just pause on that for a second. In our culture, which is so focused on the individual achiever, the solo entrepreneur, the self-made person, saying, I can't do anything by myself, feels almost, well, radical, doesn't it?
It really does. It flies in the face of so much of the prevailing wisdom about capability and strength. But importantly, the author doesn't frame it as weakness. It's presented as a foundational recognition of their own limits. And, perhaps surprisingly, this recognition led directly to a deep sense of gratitude.
Yeah, that's the unexpected twist. How does acknowledging limitation lead to gratitude?
Well, the way the author explains it, because they know they can't do it all alone, they naturally assume or maybe hope someone else will do it for me. It's not entitlement, it's an acceptance of interdependence. So when someone does step in, when someone does contribute, it's not just expected task completion. It's perceived as a genuine gift, a crucial piece of the puzzle they couldn't provide themselves. This fosters this really deep, sincere appreciation for everyone's input.
So it changes the whole dynamic of teamwork, almost. It's not just dividing labor, it's appreciating the very possibility of completion through others.
Exactly, and the source notes this explicitly. The author apparently wrote, I was lucky, quite often. They consistently avoided taking sole credit, even for things on their resume. They acknowledged the accomplishments are real, they happened, but they emphasize they weren't achieved by their individual strength alone. It's a constant recognition of the collective effort.
So this really forces us to ask, doesn't it? In a world that just loves the solo hero narrative, how does this mindset change how we even define success or capability?
Well, it suggests a pretty profound redefinition, I think. Capability isn't necessarily about being individually brilliant at everything. Maybe true capability is the wisdom to know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and then build a system, a network, that leverages collective strength. It highlights that the ability to, build and genuinely benefit from a network of support, that might actually be ultimate strength, especially in complex fields. It's not about self-sufficiency, it's about strategic interdependence.
Knowing how to orchestrate the talents of others, maybe? Based on a clear understanding of your own limits?
Precisely. The real skill becomes identifying the gaps and finding the right people or resources to fill them, fueled by that gratitude we talked about. It's a completely different model of leadership and contribution.
Okay, so with this developing self-awareness, maybe still subconscious at this point, the author steps into their career. And this first big experience, marketing at a foreign-owned tobacco company, it becomes incredibly significant. It's almost like an accidental blueprint for success.
Yes, this period is presented as a really foundational example of an ideal collaborative environment for them. And it's key to remember, as you said, they weren't diagnosed then. They didn't have the language of ADHD or neurodiversity.
Hmm.
But the circumstances just happened to align perfectly with their cognitive style and needs. It was pure serendipity, really, but it created this environment where they could unexpectedly thrive.
So what were the magic ingredients? What made this particular setup work so well? The source highlights a few crucial factors.
Right. First, and this sounds mundane, but it's critical, the company had a relatively generous budget for using external agencies.
Ah, so resources were readily available, not something they had to constantly fight for.
Exactly. It wasn't an internal burden stretching thin resources. It was just part of how they operated. They could bring in specialized professional help from the outside almost as a matter of course. This removed a huge potential source of friction and pressure.
Okay, factor one, budget for external help. What else?
Factor two was a very direct, maybe even blunt, lesson learned right at the start. The author states, if I tried to do it myself, the president would get angry.
Wow, okay. That's pretty clear feedback.
It is, but think about what it did. It immediately clarified their role. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. Your job is not hands-on execution, your job is something else. It set a very firm boundary that perhaps unintentionally protected the author from tasks they would have struggled with.
So it defined their role as not being the doer, which leads to the third point, right? What
Mhm.
their role actually was.
Precisely. Their job was explicitly understood, by them and by management it seems, as being focused on direction. The description is quite evocative. Throwing the budget outside, letting professionals give it shape and deliver it, and then the author's role was managing the internal coordination and reporting.
So high-level strategy, concept development, and internal communication, but not the nitty-gritty execution.
Exactly. They're operating at the level of ideas, vision, and oversight, which seems to align much better with their strengths, allowing them to bypass the sequential, detail-oriented tasks that often challenge individuals with ADHD.
And within that structure, the role of the person at the external agency sounds incredibly important, almost like a translator.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The source describes how this agency representative would take the author's, quote, unorganized requests, which you can imagine might be a flood of brilliant but maybe nonlinear ideas, and actively clarify them. They'd ask things like, okay, so, are you saying this? They would patiently translate the author's vision into concrete terms. And apparently, they even use diagrams to visualize and confirm the understanding.
That sounds like an amazing partner, someone who could bridge the gap between the author's mind and the practical steps needed.
Totally. The author even speculates that this person likely noticed my characteristics from that time, even without a diagnosis, and proactively picked up where I was failing. And crucially, they did this before it became a problem. They anticipated the potential gaps in execution and bridged them, ensuring the author's ideas could move forward smoothly. It wasn't reactive, it was incredibly proactive and intuitive support.
So the author could have these big ideas, maybe scattered ideas, but this system, this partnership, meant they could actually give them shape. It was seamless.
So seamless, in fact, that the author genuinely thought, oh, this is just how marketing work is done everywhere. They didn't realize they were in this uniquely supportive bubble, this perfect ecosystem tailored, albeit accidentally, to their needs.
That's fascinating. It really underscores the power of the right environment, the right support.
It really does. This wasn't just delegation in the typical sense. It was a true partnership, an intuitive collaboration that specifically compensated for the author's challenges in translating abstract thought into concrete action. That agency rep was like the missing link. And looking at the bigger picture, it just highlights how critical the right kind of scaffolding can be. Not just any support, but support tailored to the individual's specific cognitive needs. It shows how the right environment doesn't just help someone cope, it can actually unlock their highest potential.
Okay, so after that first experience, which sounds almost like a perfect fit, the story takes a sharp turn. The author changes jobs, moves to a domestic company, still in marketing and branding. But things did not go well. A real contrast.
A stark contrast, yeah. This part of the story really highlights the devastating impact of being in an environment that doesn't provide that necessary support structure. It's almost a case study in misalignment.
And the critical difference, the thing that changed everything.
Money. Or rather, The lack of it. The source states clearly there was a severe lack of budget for external agencies in this new company. That single factor, the inability to throw the budget outside, had huge downstream consequences.
Because it forced the author back into doing the things the previous structure had protected them from.
Exactly. Without that external support, the expectation shifted. They were now supposed to manage the execution process much more directly. And this immediately exposed the areas where they struggled. For example, they mentioned having in-house designers, which sounds like support, right? But the author says they couldn't effectively convey the content to them.
So the communication breakdown resurfaced. The torn pages problem again.
Precisely. It wasn't about the designer's skill or the author's ideas. It was that fundamental difficulty in translating the complex, maybe nonlinear thoughts, that jumble of uncorrelated topics they describe later, into clear, actionable instructions for someone else. And this, understandably, led to frustration. Not just for the colleagues trying to figure out what was needed, but also for the author, who says they understood why people were upset. They could see the communication wasn't working, but felt powerless to fix it.
That sounds incredibly stressful. Knowing the problem but not being able to bridge the gap.
Immensely stressful.
Oh.
And it created this negative spiral. The author, fearing more failure, more frustration, eventually just stopped asking for help.
Oh, they withdrew. Tried to muscle through it alone.
Yeah, exactly. They tried to do everything alone, presumably trying to force themselves into that inception to delivery model that just didn't fit their cognitive style.
Their trick.
And the result, it didn't work out at all.
So the isolation and the attempt to conform actually made things worse.
Much worse, because without the necessary support and unable to effectively delegate or direct the internal team, things inevitably started to fall apart, and the perception of the author shifted. They started being seen, unfortunately, as an employee with issues, not as someone with a different working style who needed specific support, but simply as problematic.
That's rough. And it didn't end well, did it?
No, it culminated in them leaving the company due to what they term power harassment. This suggests the situation escalated beyond mere frustration into something more toxic, possibly involving misuse of authority or unfair pressure related to these perceived performance issues.
A really difficult outcome, highlighting the cost of that environmental mismatch.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does workplace conflict, or what gets labeled as underperformance, actually stem from this kind of fundamental mismatch? A clash between neurodiversity and a rigid organizational structure. The source directly links the author's difficulty explaining tasks, that mental state of countless uncorrelated topics jumbled together, to this professional failure and eventual departure. It's a powerful illustration.
Yeah, it shows how a characteristic that was managed and even leveraged in the first company became a huge liability in the second.
Exactly. An unsupported weakness became catastrophic, whereas a supported difference was part of a successful system. It's a stark lesson for organizations about the need for flexibility and understanding, rather than just assuming everyone works, or should work, the same way.
Okay. Thankfully, the story doesn't end on that difficult note. There's a positive turn, a comeback a couple of companies later. The author lands a role as a business unit manager.
Yes, a significant shift. This new role had a much broader scope, overseeing the whole business unit, marketing, sales figures, the lot. It wasn't just narrow marketing execution anymore. And the author found this much more fulfilling. It played more to their strengths in big picture thinking, strategy, seeing the whole landscape. It was a better fit from a functional perspective.
A better fit, a renewed sense of purpose. But did the core challenge disappear?
Interestingly, no. And this is key. Despite the new role, the new company, the broader scope, the fundamental issue persisted. The author had clear ideas, big plans for brand expansion, a complete roadmap in their mind. They could see the path forward, the strategy.
But
They still couldn't execute the plan as intended. The same bottleneck appeared. The brilliant vision was there, but translating it into sequential, actionable steps for the team remained a significant hurdle.
it really isolates the core difficulty, doesn't it? It wasn't the job title or the industry. It was this specific cognitive process.
Precisely. It wasn't about competence or intelligence or vision. It was about the mechanics of implementation and communication.
So how did they overcome it this time? Was it another lucky situation?
It seems so, yes. Echoing that first successful experience, luck, or perhaps good fortune in team composition, played a role. The author had a subordinate who was described as being exceptionally meticulous in how they proceeded.
Someone detail-oriented, the perfect foil.
Exactly. This person became the bridge. The source says this subordinate systematically gave shape, one by one, to the author's ideas and roadmap. They took the grand vision and painstakingly broke it down into manageable tasks, ensuring things actually move forward.
Like the agency rep, but internal this time.
Very much so. And the author is incredibly self-aware about this. They state explicitly that if they had tried to manage the execution themselves, they probably would have started multiple things at once, jumping between ideas. None would have reached completion. That's their own assessment. They recognize their tendency for parallel ideation, but difficulty with sequential follow-through. This meticulous subordinate provided that crucial linear focus.
This really leads to a fascinating insight about collaboration, doesn't it? It's not just any team.
No, not for the author. They need something very specific. They use this incredibly striking phrase saying they need another me specifically for me. In Japanese, it's watashi senyu no muhitori no watashi, like a dedicated second self.
Wow, that's much more than just a delegatee or a team member. That's like needing a cognitive partner.
Exactly. It's not about just assigning tasks. The author clarifies, I can assign people, meaning they understand delegation in principle. The difficulty isn't who does it. The difficulty, the real crux of the matter, is clearly explaining what to do. That's the bottleneck.
And they explain why, right? That internal state.
Yes, they describe their mind as being in a state of countless uncorrelated topics jumbled together. Trying to take that complex, nonlinear internal world and simplify it, articulate it clearly, sequence it for someone else. They say it's just too burdensome.
The sheer mental effort required to translate that internal chaos into external linear instructions is overwhelming.
Precisely. It's an executive function challenge, translating the vision into actionable steps for others. So this subordinate wasn't just doing tasks. They were essentially performing that translation function. They were interpreting the author's mental roadmap and making it usable for the rest of the team.
So thinking about companies, how common is this need? And how can organizations possibly accommodate it? It's beyond standard management training.
It's a huge question. It suggests that for certain types of thinkers, particularly visionary or highly creative individuals who might also be neurodivergent, the support needed isn't just resources or manpower, it's this specific kind of cognitive partnership. The agency rep, this meticulous subordinate, they were the fixers of those torn pages we'll talk more about. They filled in the procedural gaps. It highlights that for some, the most critical skill they bring isn't doing the work, but enabling others to do it by providing the vision, while relying on others to provide the structure and clarity for execution.
And if companies don't recognize or provide that specific kind of support,
They risk losing out on immense talent. They might have brilliant strategists or innovators who can't function effectively within a standard structure, not because they lack ability, but because the support system doesn't match their cognitive needs.
let's dig into that metaphor the author uses because it's really striking. This idea of torn pages to describe how they see the world and how it affects their work.
It's a powerful image, yeah. It really helps to visualize their internal experience. The author explains that when they look at a project or an idea through their particular glasses, their perspective, they primarily perceive two things very clearly.
Which are?
The initial idea, that spark, the concept, and then they jump right to the societal change after it's completed. They see the beginning and the ultimate end result, the big impact.
Okay, so the grand vision and the final outcome.
Right. But they say the pages in between, all the steps, the processes, the details required to actually get from point A to point Z, it's as if someone has torn them out.
Wow, so the whole implementation roadmap is just missing from their view.
Or at least it's not clear and sequential in the way it might be for others. And going back to that first job, the agency they worked with, they were the ones who effectively put those torn pages back together. They filled in the gaps, wrote the missing chapters of the process.
That metaphor really lands. It explains so much about the challenges in the second company and the need for that second me.
It does. And it starkly contrasts with what the author calls normal work today. This widespread expectation, especially now, that a single person should often handle a task from inception to delivery.
The idea that you own it start to finish, conceive it, plan it, do it, deliver it.
Exactly. That's a dominant model in many places. But the author's experience suggests this normal might be incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, for people wired like them. It sets them up for failure if the right support isn't there.
And they point out that after that first well-funded company, many other places just didn't have the budget for that kind of external outsourcing.
Right. which meant the author was constantly being forced to try and put those torn pages back together myself. They were being asked to do the very thing their cognitive wiring made incredibly difficult.
It sounds exhausting and inefficient.
Totally. The author makes this really interesting comparison. They talk about a new higher education model, where maybe someone is naturally brilliant at, say, big picture strategy, but they're forced to endlessly practice the detailed execution they struggle with.
Like trying to train a fish to climb a tree.
Kind of. The author argues that this approach, trying to force someone to get good at what they fundamentally can't do easily, hoping they'll eventually improve, is actually detrimental in a business context. By the time that person possibly gets marginally better at their weak point, the author argues the market battle will already be lost. You've wasted precious time and energy focusing on weakness instead of amplifying strength.
So it's not just about individual struggle, it's actually bad business strategy.
That's the implication. It's a critique of a system that might be systematically sidelining valuable talent, the visionaries, the innovators, by insisting everyone fit into this one-size-fits-all inception to delivery mold. It suggests we might need more specialized roles, more accepted interdependence, to truly leverage diverse talents.
It really challenges the way we think about roles and responsibilities in organizations. Maybe hyper-specialization isn't always bad.
Or at least recognizing that different people excel at different parts of the process and structuring teams to reflect that, rather than expecting everyone to be a generalist who can do it all. The torn pages need someone to put them back, and that person might not be the one who envisioned the book in the first place.
Okay, so given these experiences, the good, the bad, the really challenging, the author doesn't just leave us with the problem. They offer some pretty strong, actionable advice, especially for anyone listening who might feel like they relate, maybe feel they're in that gray zone themselves.
Yes, this is where it becomes very practical, very empowering. The core message is direct. Don't be ashamed to get diagnosed.
That's a big step for many people.
Huge. But the author frames it not as labeling a flaw, but as gaining crucial information. A diagnosis, whether it's ADHD or something else, can provide an explanation. It gives you a framework, a language to understand yourself. It can move you from what's wrong with me to, okay, this is how my brain works, now what? It's presented as a tool for self-knowledge and ultimately self-acceptance.
And once you have that understanding, whether from a diagnosis or just deep self-reflection,
Then the advice is to draw a line. Be crystal clear with yourself. Okay, this part I cannot do effectively myself, therefore I have to ask someone else or find another way.
so radical self-honesty about limitations.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not about giving up. It's strategic. It's about conserving your energy for where you can excel. It's acknowledging the torn pages and deciding not to keep trying to tape them together yourself if it's ineffective and draining. It's deciding to find a bookbinder.
And this line isn't just an internal boundary, is it? It's about communicating it.
Crucially, yes. The author advises telling colleagues within the company, being open about what you can and can't do reliably, and what kind of support helps you perform at your best.
That takes guts. What if people react badly?
Well, the author has this really striking perspective on that. They say, if communicating your needs leads to people distancing themselves or you being excluded, then, and this is powerful, that means it was a place where you would eventually be excluded anyway.
Wow. So rejection is actually data, information about the environment.
Exactly. It's reframed as a filtering mechanism. It tells you quickly and clearly, this environment isn't compatible with my needs. Instead of internalizing it as personal failure, you see it as environmental feedback, saving you potentially years of struggle in the wrong place. It's almost liberating in a way.
Okay, so identify your needs, communicate them, and use the reaction as feedback. But what if you can't find that supportive environment?
Right. The author acknowledges finding the perfect fit is lucky. If you don't find it, the advice gets even more proactive, almost entrepreneurial. Option 1. You have no choice but to create one.
Create your own environment, like start your own business or carve out a niche.
Potentially, yes.
Huh.
Or strategically shape your roles over time. But if even that's not feasible, the advice gets really unconventional. The author suggests, even if it's out of your own pocket, you should finish and submit the parts of your work you think you can't do by using services like Coconula.
So literally hire your own support. Use platforms like Fiverr or Upwork to outsource the torn pages of your own job.
That's the suggestion. It's radical self-funding of your own support needs. Pay someone else to do the tasks that block you so you can focus on the parts you excel at and deliver the overall result.
The cost, the author acknowledges you might end up with no money left in your hand at first.
They do. It's presented as an investment, a calculated risk. The argument is, if a big project advances and your title goes up because of it, then that's lucky. The implication is clear. Investing in your own support structure, even personally, can unlock higher performance, lead to career advancement, and ultimately provide a return that justifies the initial cost. It's betting on yourself by strategically buying the health you need to succeed.
That is a truly proactive, almost defiant stance. It's not waiting for the system to accommodate you. It's actively building your own scaffold, even if you have to pay for the materials yourself.
Exactly. It's about taking radical ownership of your success, using whatever tools are available, even unconventional ones, to bridge the gaps and leverage your strengths. It's strategy and self-advocacy taken to a whole new level.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the author leaves us with this final, really powerful, and maybe quite counterintuitive thought. It's the idea that deciding you cannot do something isn't weakness, but actually strength.
It's a profound reframe, isn't it? It challenges everything we're usually taught about perseverance and pushing through limitations. The author states it very clearly. Deciding that you cannot do something and choosing not to do it is not powerlessness.
So it's not resignation?
No, it's presented as a conscious, strategic choice, a choice based on deep self-awareness. Instead of banging your head against a wall, trying to force yourself to do something that consistently drains you or leads to poor results, you make a decision. And then comes the really bold assertion. That is precisely your strength.
How is not doing something a strength?
Because, the argument goes, it frees you. It frees up immense mental energy, emotional bandwidth, and time that would otherwise be consumed by struggling with your cannot do areas. By strategically choosing not to engage in those areas and instead finding ways to have them handled by others. Through collaboration, delegation, even outsourcing, you can focus all your resources on your genuine strengths, the things you can do, perhaps brilliantly. It's about optimizing your impact by eliminating the drag of your limitations.
So strength lies in the strategic allocation of your own energy based on honest self-assessment.
Exactly. It's knowing yourself well enough to play to your strengths and actively manage your weaknesses, rather than pretending they don't exist or futilely trying to eliminate them.
And this perspective comes after, as the author acknowledges, many unpleasant experiences because of their neurodiversity, real struggles.
Yes, this isn't an abstract philosophy, it's hard-won wisdom. And despite those struggles, the conviction is remarkable. They say if they have to live their whole life with this condition, then they are determined, absolutely determined to have confidence in my cannot do parts and have others do them no matter what.
That's quite a declaration. Confidence in the cannot do.
It's radical self-acceptance coupled with relentless strategic action. It's saying, this is me, this is how I operate best, I'm not going to apologize for it, and I will build the systems I need to succeed as me.
It really pushes us to think differently about value, doesn't it? What if knowing your limits and collaborating effectively was valued more than struggling alone?
What if indeed? And the author's final thought on this is incredibly telling about how they navigate the world now. They consider the potential dismissive question. Then what is your purpose? What's your reason for being here if you can't do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, that's the kind of pushback someone might get.
Right. And the author's response, not defensiveness, not anger. They say, I'm even grateful for those words.
Grateful. Why?
Because, they explain, they taught me that it's not the place for me.
More data, more environmental feedback.
Exactly. That dismissive question isn't taken as a valid critique of their worth. It's taken as a clear signal that the environment, the person asking, the organizational culture is fundamentally incompatible. The signpost saying, wrong place, move on. It allows them to disengage and seek out environments where their actual contributions are understood and valued. It turns potential criticism into a navigation tool.
That's an incredibly resilient and empowering way to frame those negative interactions. It's all about finding the right fit.
It is. It's the ultimate takeaway, perhaps. Success isn't about forcing yourself to fit everywhere. It's about finding or creating the specific places where your unique configuration can genuinely thrive.
So reflecting on all this, what does it really mean for you, our listener? This deep dive into thriving with ADHD, a career in collaboration. It really does flip the script, doesn't it, on how we think about individual achievement, strength, weakness.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
We've journeyed through this story and seen how understanding your own unique way of thinking really embracing those cannot do areas, not as failures, but as defining characteristics. It's crucial. And then strategically using collaboration, maybe even paying for it yourself, or being really specific at the kind of support you need that's not weakness. The story suggests it's a powerful, maybe even essential pathway to success and, importantly, fulfillment.
Yeah, it's all about finding that ecosystem, right? The environment where your specific strengths, your unique wiring can actually flourish instead of being seen as a problem to be fixed.
Exactly. And recognizing that sometimes what feels like a personal deficit, a struggle, it might actually be the catalyst, the thing that pushes you to build better, more effective, maybe even more grateful and human collaborative systems around you. The limitation forces innovation in how you work with others.
It really forces a rethink of normal work.
It does. Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on, something to mull over after listening.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the normal way of working, that inception to delivery by one person model, just isn't clicking for you, if you know deep down you can't really do it all yourself effectively,
Right.
then what are those torn pages in your own work? And maybe more importantly, what are you willing to do about it? Who are you willing to ask or maybe even pay to help put those pages back together? What investment are you willing to make, be it in vulnerability or time or resources, to build a support system that could unlock your full potential and let you make the impact you're truly capable of?
That's a great question to sit with. What are your porn pages and how can you get them put back together? Lots to think about there. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and definitely keep thriving in your own unique way.